Well, welcome everybody to session number 4. We're going to be talking to you about the economic and the environmental evidence, quantified outcomes-based evidence that soil health practices can and do work. I am joined today by 4 additional lovely AFT staff members who are all part of what we call the AFT case study and predictive assessment team, starting with Florence Schwartz, who will be leading the first run through of one Ohio economic case study. Aaron Ristow from New York, the author of our 3 New York case studies, and he'll be sharing one of those. Ben Wierzinski, our newest member of the case study team, will be sharing one about an FRPP easement farmer. That has not yet been published, but it's on its way. And we're so glad to be joined by a special guest. Morgan Bond of B&M Farms herself was able to make space for us on her schedule. So she's going to speak onto the agenda. We're really excited about that. And we're going to wrap up with a change from the case studies to a predictive assessment, retrospective analysis to predictive future analysis, and that's going to be by Sarah Blount. Well, I'm just going to get underway. We're probably going to run out of time, but hopefully this is going to be a fun, educational, interesting session, and hopefully we're going to have 20 minutes for Q&A, both with the farmer, Morgan, as well as with all of these speakers. So the objective of this session is to help familiarize all of you folks who are FRPP entity easement experts to become familiar with these AFT co-branded with NRCS soil health, economic, and environmental case studies that provide these quantitative calculated estimates of the costs, the benefits, the return on investment experienced by what we lovingly call soil health successful farmers, those who have had 4 or more years of success and have economic stories that they want to share with the world. What has been their economic costs and what has been their observed as well as their estimated water quality benefits, and of course their calculated GHG climate benefits. And we're going to explore ways that we think, we're going to put it to you, and we want your feedback. We've come up with several ways for you to possibly use these case studies with your FRPP landowners and farmers. And we'd love to hear if these are reasonable options for you. And if you have feedback for us for what else you would like to see, we're all ears. We're hoping that you will see these case studies as resources to slide across the table, the pickup truck, a handout at a field day to talk to your FRPP landowner and farmer about them potentially adopting soil health practices one day. So I'm kicking us off with some summary findings. Somebody asked in the last session, what about this economic evidence? So I'm going to present, of all the 7 row crop farms, a range of the results in who experienced some economic increases in yield and all the other summary findings. And then I will explore these options for use with you. And then each of the different authors of the case studies will present one of theirs in 2 different ways. And we'll talk to you a little bit about that later. And then there's that wonderful guest speaker, Morgan is coming on, and then that 20-minute Q&A. And if we have time, we're going to show you additional things that aren't necessarily meant for you FRPP entity representatives, but for your potential partners at NRCS and soil water conservation districts. So if we run out of time, that's okay. We'll share it with them later. So let's start off with project background, right? Why quantify soil health outcomes? Well, you may or may not know, I think Bianca has totally underscored it, there's a heck of a lot of scientific evidence out there proving that no-till, reduced tillage, cover crops, nutrient management, and conservation crop rotations do improve soil health, reduce runoff, lower climate emissions, and sequester carbon. But there just not is enough information about the economic evidence that that farmers can make money at it too, or at least reduce costs. And so the whole ag community, which is large, wants to know what is the economic bottom line. So we put together a 2018 USDA Conservation Innovation Grant project that tried to drive soil health adoption by estimating the net economic and environmental benefits associated with adoption of soil health practices. And we developed two new economic tools, the Retrospective Soil Health Economic Calculator, RSHEC tool, or the Predictive Soil Health Economic Calculator, or PSHEC tool. And we used available USDA water quality and climate tools, nutrient tracking tool, and Comet Farm tool, and packaged all of that up into 2-page compelling case studies featuring soil health successful farmers. We're hoping to empower conservationists and budding conservationists just like you to use these case studies featuring soil health successful producers when you talk to your farmers, and maybe even use the predictive assessment featuring a soil health curious farmer that Sarah Brandt will tell us about. And the theory of change is that, you know, if more of our fellow conservationists can get these case studies out there and develop their own case studies, that the faster we're going to get more farmers to yes on more acres and more soil health. So the soil health team, I'm the project leader, water initiative director, and Florence Schwartz is our project economist that developed all these amazing tools for us. And she's retired from NRCS. She was the New York State economist for many decades. We brought on Darshan Khalsa from UC Davis to help us with our almond case studies. And we took a look around, and there are terrific other economic case studies out there. So I encourage you to hunt these down. But we really love the ones that came from NRCS New York, closed case studies, but these are other ones near NRCS Missouri, National Associations of Conservation Districts, and Datu Research. If you feel like your farmer wants to dig in and 2 pages is not enough, we got 4 16-page case studies from NACD for that farmer. And if you think a farmer doesn't want the partial budget analysis, which I'm going to tell you about, and wants a farm enterprise analysis, then there's 3 of those from EDF and Keiko ISOM to look into. So we really fell in love with Flo's NRCS New York case studies, and we modeled ours after hers. And what does that mean? Well, we wanted to show what are the potential ways that soil health practices can increase income and decrease cost. What are the ways they can decrease income and increase costs? And then what's the bottom line? If you add those together, what's the total net positive economic benefit, and divide that by the total acres of a study area to get a unit of measurement in dollar per acre that is potentially useful to all readers. So let me tell you about these economic methods. To teach a partial budget analysis, Flo, which is what all of the team conducted, Flo had to develop a calculator and based it on NRCS's cover crops calculator. And so if you want to see what that's like, that's a terrific tool focused on helping farmers decide whether it makes economic sense to adopt cover crops. Please follow that link there or use those keywords, NRCS Missouri cover crop tool. And so we took a look at that, the framework, the bones, oh, so good. And so we developed our RSHEC and PSHEC tools off of that, because what NRCS has and teaches their conservation planner is this level 3 T-chart, and there just wasn't enough structure to help make sure our staff were asking the right questions. So again, what's a partial budget analysis? Well, it's this fancy economic term to just talk about estimating the economic benefits and costs of variables affected by a change in a farming operation. So for this study, PBA really simply just tries to identify and compare the costs and benefits before soil health practice adoption to after soil health practice adoption. And it's as simple as that. What happened? How'd you grow your farm? How'd you grow your crops? What did it cost? And what changed once you adopted these practices? So to do that, we developed a 21-page questionnaire that takes an hour to an hour and a half to administer, interviewing with the farmer via virtual or in person, and an 11-tab economic calculator in Excel to input all of that data. And We use national data sets for crops, prices, machinery, fertilizer, etc., rather than farmer-specific prices in case the farmer got a great deal on the fertilizer from his brother-in-law at the co-op, right? You want to try to raise the level of specificity so it's something reasonable, an estimate that's reasonable for everybody. The primary economic effects that were evaluated are machinery, fertilizer, pesticide, yield, erosion repair, and learning costs and other costs that might come up. Meet the team. You're going to hear from Aaron today, and Brian was going to join us, given there's a lot of Ohio folks in the room, but he unfortunately is on vacation. So Flo's stepping in for him. And if you want to read the other case studies, here are the authors of those case studies in the other states. And these are the newest additions to our AFT case study team. Ellen Yateman has been shadowing Flo for the last 10 months, and she's taking over as our reviewing economist. She's an ag economist herself. Ben Wierzicki is our author of the FRQP case studies and predictive assessments, and he's our new ag economist. And Sarah Blount is the author, first author ever of our predictive assessments. So the methods for the environmental analysis, you can keyword search nutrient tracking tool, and you'll find this USDA tool that estimates the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the sediment runoff when you tell the tool what you were doing before your conservation practices, and then when you're analyzing a conservation scenario. It's a great, quick, and easy to use tool, and our authors conducted a questionnaire in order to get the right data to enter into the tool to provide water quality benefit analyses for each of their farmers. Similarly, a USDA tool called Comet Farm Tool provides climate emissions estimates of all the variety of methane emissions, carbon sequestration, nitrogen oxide, and we simply looked at the total greenhouse gases, and we estimated those and put those in our case studies. A big shout out to the external reviewers of the case studies, because it was their hard work providing us with great feedback on how to improve the case studies. And Bianca Mobius-Clunes, when she was at NRCS and the director of the Soil Health Division, that because of all of this hard work by her team and many others, she agreed to put NRCS's logo onto the case study. So a big shout out to all of them and their hard work. And there it is, the famed NRCS logo, to co-brand the case studies and get them out into a wider audience, knowing that NRCS thinks they're pretty credible. So here is a summary of what they all look like: 2 California almond, 2 Illinois corn soybean, 2 Ohio corn soybean, and 3 diversified row crop farms. Here is the flip side with the great PBA table on the back. And here are the overarching findings. Of the 7 row crop farmers, or I'm ignoring the 2 almond farmers because they're totally on their own, right? 2 of them reported no change in yield attributable to soil health practices, but 5 of them said, yes, I believe my yield increased to the tune of 2 to 22% over the 7 farmers for at least one of my crops grown. 7 of those farmers did increase, say they increased income from a range of $11 to $56 per acre. The return on investment, all of them we estimated was positive, ranging from 18 to a whopping 343%. In terms of changes in fertilizer costs attributable to the soil health practices, 1 farmer said they increased cost, 4 said they reduced cost, and 2 saw no change for a range of $18 to $66 per acre. The changes in machinery, fuel, labor costs due to tillage, 1 farmer said, no change. 6 reduced their costs, ranging from $14 to $72 per acre. Pesticides, meaning the herbicides, the insecticides, the fungicides, 3 said no change attributable to soil health practices. 4 said there were changes. 2 had to increase this use. There's the range there. And 2 said, I was able to cut back on these things because of my cover crops or no-till. Learning costs was a difficult thing to try to pin folks down. So we have a very big range there of, what it took for them to overcome educational barriers and climb that educational ladder. And here are some environmental benefits averages. all of them reported great stories to us that said they saw changes, more earthworms, better beneficial insects, less erosion, less ponding, less dirty water, told us great stories. And then using NTT, we have these estimates for nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment, and the ranges there. And using Comet Farm, you can see the averages and the ranges for the total greenhouse gas reduction benefits as well. Here are our ideas on how you might use the case studies with your FRPP landowners and farmers. First and foremost, we've heard a lot of the previous speakers talk about, cementing a working relationship with your local conservation service providers, reaching out, establishing that safety net to build for your FRPP landowners and farmers. First of all, share with them these case studies and these materials, this PowerPoint slide deck, because they might not know about it and they might value it as a new tool in their conservation toolbox. Then ask them, can I introduce you to my FRPP landowners and farmers to help them on their next step in the conservation journey? So you FRPP people can be a super duper helper in that journey by providing these case studies and these PowerPoint materials, but then you may want to turn them over to someone who can provide technical assistance and help them with financial assistance if that's needed. So you can print out the case studies, use them as handouts. You can print out, for example, those 4 summary slides I showed for the 7 row crop farmers. You could talk from those as a handout. And coming up, you could print out what we're calling stories with multiple slides. And so each of our authors have prepared those sets for the 2 Ohio, 3 New York, and 1 Pennsylvania case study, as well as the 1 Illinois predictive assessment. So if you've got farmers who like a lot of detail, maybe this 6-slide approach per case study will work for that farmer. But if you've got a farmer that doesn't want a lot of detail, we've got the 1 take-home message per case study document as an approach too. So we'd love to hear your feedback on this during the Q&A. Are these materials, what you're about to see, going to be useful to you? Do you feel emboldened? Do you feel confident to use them to talk to your FRPP farmers? How do you access the case studies? I've got 2 slides left. You can find them by a keyword search, AFT soil health case studies, AFT economic case studies, or this hyperlink right there to download and start printing them out, using them as handouts, keep them in your car, your truck. You've been sent your own copies from Beth. Thank you, Beth. And you can also get them from 2 NRCS sites, both of these, a soil health site and an economic site. Simply keyword search NRCS economic case studies, and you can get them at both sites. So I think I did pretty good, maybe 1 or 2 minutes over time. And I'm going to turn it over now to our next speaker, Florence Schwartz, our AFT consultant, retired from NRCS New York, on behalf of Brandt, the author of these 2 Ohio case studies. He is also our AFT Ag Conservation Innovations Director, and he's currently on vacation. So she will, I will be in charge of the slides, and I'll let Flo go.
Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon. I'm happy to be here and actually sitting in for Brian. I didn't realize he was on vacation. I was thinking he had some other important commitment. So anyway, still
vacation is important, Flo.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Anyway, I'm going to start out with sharing with you the case study for Eric Nehemiah, whose story was among the first group of soil health successful farmer case studies developed by AFT staff. Eric's farm straddles Marion and Delaware counties in Ohio. The entire farm encompasses 1,250 acres, and he's unusual in that all of that land was included in the study area for this analysis. As a first-generation farmer, Eric had a lot to learn. Nevertheless, fairly early on, he embraced the idea of improving the health of his soils and moved to adopt no-till, cover crops, and variable rate technology nutrient management on his entire operation. These changes in crop management were motivated by Eric's desire to eliminate runoff and erosion, improve nutrient cycling, improve weed management, and, as Eric says, make dead soil alive again. The result of these efforts was an improved bottom line, our case study estimates that he increased his overall net return by $47,568 per year for the entire study area, or $38 per acre per year for just per acre. This translates into a 35% return on investment, meaning that for every dollar invested, Eric's net returns have increased by 35 cents. So next, this table shows the increases in net income resulting from Eric's adoption of soil health practices. Starting with increased income, Eric reported yield improvements for both his corn and soybeans valued at $69 per acre. Increases in net income were further bolstered by decreases in costs, including savings in fertilizer, reduced herbicide applications, machinery cost savings of fuel, labor, repairs, and operating expenses, and reduced erosion resulting in fewer field repairs being needed. The total decreased cost is $97,761 for the study area. Total increased net income, accounting for both the increased income and decreased costs, is about $184,000 for the study area, or $147 per acre. This table shows Eric's decreases in net income in terms of decreases in income or increases in cost. There is no anticipated decrease in income, but there are increased costs. These include the cost for use of variable rate technology, increased soil testing, time spent learning about new practices, cover crops in particular, the use of biological amendments to enhance nutrient availability, increased machinery costs, and of course, the cost of growing cover crops. The total increased cost is $136,442 for the study area and $109 per acre. The results from the previous two slides are summarized here, where the total annual increase in net income of $147 per acre appears on the left, and the total annual decrease in net income of $109 per acre appears on the right. By subtracting the decrease in net income from the increase in net income, we arrive at the annual change in net income of $38 per acre. AFT also examined the environmental effects of adopting no-till, nutrient management, and cover crops on a 110-acre field on Eric's farm. The nutrient tracking tool indicates that nitrogen has been reduced by 58%, phosphorus by 74%, and sediment by 88% as a result. Atmospheric impacts, as measured by Comet Farm, show that greenhouse gas emissions were reduced by 494%, which is the equivalent of taking 17 cars off the road. Eric credits all three practices with making his farm consistently profitable in spite of marginal soils. Eric customizes his cover crop blend based on his soil health goals and says he can see and smell the improvements to the soil. Like all farmers, Eric did face barriers to adopting soil health practices. Financial barriers, including purchasing a high clearance seeder that allows him to plant his cover crops earlier while the cash crop is still growing. He also had to increase the frequency of soil testing to allow implementation of variable rate technology. Trial and error in implementing soil health practices were the basis for technological barriers that Eric encountered. And in Eric's case, because he is a first-generation farmer, he faced a steeper learning curve than more experienced farmers. He also wrestled with fine-tuning his cover crop mixes to optimize his particular system of crop management. These were the 6 slides for Eric Nehemiah. If you feel they may be too much information for a farmer to digest, here is a slide that nicely summarizes the study in the form of a take-home message. Eric adopted 3 soil health practices on 1,250 acres: cover crops, no-till, variable rate technology, nutrient management. The change Eric is most excited about is planting green into growing cover and terminating the cover with a roller crimper, which creates a thick mat of residue, virtually eliminating the need for residual herbicides, a savings of $18 per acre every year, and cutting in half the soybean seed treatment costs. Eric attributes half of his yield increases for both corn and soybeans to soil health practice adoption. Annual soil health benefits are $184,011. Annual soil health costs are $136,442. And the annual change in net income due to soil health practices is $47,569 for the 1,250 acre study area, or $38 an acre. Next comes a similar series of slides for Dan Lane, the second Ohio farmer that we have a case study for, but I won't be presenting them here. Rather, these slides are available for your use should you think Dan Lane's story resonates better with some of your landowners and farmers than Eric Nehemiah's does, or perhaps you'll want to use both case studies. So instead, I'll wrap up with this contact information for Brian Brandt, who would be happy to hear from you should you have questions or need more information on the Ohio case studies.
Terrific. Thank you. So I'm just going to slide through here to show you that we've prepared for you a similar, set of 6 to go into detail if you think Dan Lane's story will resonate better with your farmer. And then again, if that's too much information, here's the one slide with that elevator level of a story to share. And now I'm going to turn it over to our Aaron Risto, who is our New York Ag Stewardship Program Manager and author of not 1, not 2, but 3 AFT-NRCS economic case studies featuring soil health successful New York farmers. Aaron?
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Flo. I appreciate all the work you did to prepare the calculator and the format for these studies. They've been very helpful for me in sharing this information. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'm going to focus on one farm out of the 3, Jay Swede of Gary Swede Farms. He's located in Pavilion, New York. Go ahead with, which is in Genesee County. It's Western New York. It's the Genesee River watershed. So he's a crop farm that also gets manure from a dairy. So they have a partnership there. So that's the focus that we had, was his dairy rotation, which was 1,500 acres. And so there's a variety of crops that go through in general, of sweet corn and different corn silage, grain corn, alfalfa, wheat. But in 2005, they went from conventional tillage to strip till. And then by 2018, they were doing either no-till or strip till on their entire farm, all 4,500 acres. But again, we're focusing on 1,500 here. Their farm had been doing rye since the 80s, but in around 2005, they started experimenting with other cover crops with radishes and wheat and oats. In particular, oats is kind of the foundation of it. They switched to oats because of winter kills. And they started with a comprehensive nutrient management plan. They went to more frequent and grid sampling for their soil samples. They do manure injection and split applications of nitrogen. So they've been doing that for quite some time as well. They are cover cropping 450 acres out of that 1,500 acres. So their farm either has alfalfa or cover on quite a bit, but out of this rotation of the study, we looked at 450 acres. So they started these practices to try to reduce compaction. Erosion was also an issue, and also just looking to reduce their input costs and having more time available to do other things, everything that needs to get done on the farm. So there's a little animation here, Michelle. So the bottom line is, really they have these profits of $82,000 a year, or $55 an acre. It's one of the higher returns that we saw, and it's a 343% return on investment. Next.
Well, I'm going to interrupt just
No.
to say that, Aaron, what helps me, if you all like little tips here, that ROI of 343%, what I like to do is say to people, so after the initial $1 of investment in soil health, this farmer received that $1 back and then made an additional $3.43 extra because of the benefits of the soil health practices. So our first farmer, you remember it was a 35% return on investment, if memory serves. So you can say that first farmer, Eric Nehemiah, invested $1 in soil health, got that $1 back, and then made an additional 35 cents off of the benefits that accrued from the soil health improving over time. Hopefully that was helpful for you explaining these ROI numbers.
Yeah, that's very good. So thank you for that clarification. So one of the biggest reasons for him having that increase in his net income was from an increase in yield. So like Nehemiah, there was a yield attributed, an increase in yield. So Jay has really good records. For going back a couple of decades. So he was able to really get a solid number on his yield, and he attributed about a third of his increase in yields due to the soil health practices. Other attributes were the varieties, improvement in varieties, and just technology. But he was really comfortable with saying about a third of that was from soil health. And then, so that's the number that we used, was a third of the overall increase. So that's what's reflected here. And then he had some decreases in costs. So you can imagine he went from 3 to 4 passes down to 1 pass. So there's a lot fewer, a lot less fuel burned, repair costs, machinery, wear and tear, that sort of thing. With nutrient management, there's more efficient uses of nutrients. So one thing he's noticed is he's applying the same amount of nitrogen, but getting a higher yield. And usually you have to apply more nitrogen to feed that corn or crop to get it to produce more, but not in his case. And also just the timing is better. So he's giving that, he's not losing as much through injection. And so that's getting into the soil, and also the split application is feeding the corn when it needs it the most. So it's just maximizing his inputs. And then he's noticed less repairs on his fields, less gully washouts, that sort of thing. So that's resulted in this $71 per acre total increase in income, and from that 1,500 acres. Then he does have costs. So he didn't have any decreases in income, but there were costs for setting up the planter to handle the residue. There's a lot of residue from the no-till and from some of the cover crop residue there. And then again, planting this, buying the seed, planting, harvesting costs, that sort of thing with cover crops. And then with nutrient management, the learning activities around all those activities. So that had a cost that we accounted for, though it wasn't really that significant compared to just the overall cost of the cover crops, which is pretty typical across all the farms. And that resulted in this $16 decrease in income. So when you look at the summary of the increases and the decreases, which is the next slide, you can see that $71 of increase minus the $16 gives you that, and there is animation here, the $55 per acre and that 35% return on investment. So that is quite a return, considering what the belief is normally of that there would be this cost. So next slide.
And that was, being conservative and just attributing a third of the increases in yield to soil health and giving 2/3 of the increases in yield to better yield varieties, good weather, and other factors. Correct.
And there were environmental benefits. So with the water quality, he did see reductions. Take a step back. We looked at a 25-acre field. So, you can't really think about Nehemiah's, who had 125 acre. So they had a much more higher taking cars off the road, but it has a lot to do with the acreage of the sample size. So my sample was about 25 acres. New York does tend to have smaller fields. So this was a typical size for Jay, and it was a typical rotation through that field over the years. So that's why we picked it. So he had, I'd say, significant reductions in those nutrients and sediment. and also his greenhouse gas reductions by nearly 500%. And yeah, 2 cars off the road, but 25 acres. And then he had some observational information about less wind and water erosion. He definitely noticed improved infiltration, getting in the field sooner. And I mentioned the more efficient use of nutrients. And another thing for the environment, he's not tilling as much, he's saving fuel, and that also is good for the environment. His little antidote there is his snowmekes are remaining whiter in the winter, or they are white. He noticed that big change right there alone. And then going on to the barriers. So he does strip till. So the first year or so, he had difficulty going back and getting the seed right in the right spot, and then also planting that cover crop in the same spot. So they invested in auto steer and RTK, which is basically a navigational communication system. But he was going to do those things anyway for his farm, but it just pushed them into doing it when they did. And it solved that issue. And then with oats, they can get really thick and act like a shield. They seal up the ground stays moist. So it's too wet to get onto, stays too cool maybe to plant, so you have to get out there later. And then also it prevents a good seed to soil contact with the cash crop. But they adjusted their seeding rate, so that takes some time. And also you might have a dry year, maybe it's not an issue. So there's some give and play. There's an art to it for sure. And then also he does have these. He plants the cover crops in strips. I didn't get into it because I don't have time, but that there's a wheat there that has this large root mass, and that could be challenging as well. But they manage it. And he does spend, like I said, some time each year, 16 hours with different learning activities. So the take-home message, so I'm going to have to update this slide to add, I will do that after this, to add the economic information. I didn't put that in there. But, yield improvements I mentioned, eliminating tillage passes, that's a consistent money saver over all the farms and all these studies. It really does help pay for cover crops and other practices. By saving that money, they just reinvest it into the farm, into doing some other conservation. His fertilizer costs were down. I mentioned applying the same amount of N, but having higher yields. He had to invest in some technologies, but he probably would have anyway. And yeah, there's his management practices there. I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the tips because I think I'm the only one with the tips. So I've got some hot tips here. Get out your pencil. Working with farmers on these, you're going to be talking to them. So I think these days, most farms that we work with do already know about the importance of soil health. They get it. It's just more about how to put it into their system. How's it going to work for them? So it's kind of like, we all know we should exercise more and eat less and meditate and do all these healthy things for us, but hardly any of us do it. And it's because it's hard to figure out how to do it. And we don't maybe have resources to pay for a gym membership, or what I would like is a private chef. And so we don't do it. But so what's important is to listen to what the farmers say, that what their concerns are. That's what I would start first when you have this conversation. Listen to them. You may have an agenda, but take the time to listen to what they're saying and what their concerns are and what their barriers are, because if you don't address those barriers, that you're not going to get anywhere. And part of the barrier is a belief that there's an economic limitation. And so this is one way to show that, hey, what we're seeing time and time again, that there is an economic benefit. Also be clear with your message. So after you listen to the farmer, and it's like, what is their concern? So like, they may just want to stop spending so much money and reduce their inputs. If that's all they care about, direct your message to that. But maybe you were walking around and saw some severe erosion in a field. Maybe that's what you want to talk about. So you're going to focus on, this issue of erosion or a conservation practice. So just be clear about it, but it also address the clarity of the message is also addressing their concerns too. You want to make sure to do that. I would say match these stories with the farm type and region. So don't, the California stories are great, but if you don't work with almonds, don't hand them all 9 stories. Really pick ones. And that's why I think Michelle and Flo did a good job of setting you up to really have an understanding of which ones might match your farm. So even though these are in New York, I do think, like, for example, in Ohio, there could be some overlap there. I would recommend understanding that table enough to explain it to the farmer. If they start asking you questions about the table and you shrug your shoulders and say, I don't know, someone smart made this, you're going to lose some credibility. So you want to make sure, I would even recommend practicing explaining it to somebody in your office or a coworker. Just have them ask you questions and just make sure you understand it. We don't expect you to be an ag economist or an agronomist or a psychologist. You don't have to be everything to everybody, but just make sure that, and it's okay to say no, well, I don't understand, or I'm not sure, I'll get back to you, or I'll find someone. Because if you start talking about something you don't understand, the farmers are going to sniff that out right away, and then you lose all credibility. So just make sure that you know your capabilities and limitations and don't overstretch. And I think that's all I have.
Aaron put together, how I did the summary of the 7 farms. Aaron did it for the 3 New York farms. That's really, really cool. And he has all these extra great slides here that you may have seen some of this from Bianca, but there's excellent slides having to do with additive effects. It's not just single practices, it's the whole system and how benefits improve when you layer practices one on top of the other. And this shows how we can come back from degraded soils and we can increase resilience. So these are terrific slides that you might choose to use too. And for more information, here's Aaron's contact information. And we'll turn it over to our second to the last AFT speaker, Sarah Blount, our Midwest conservation technician and author of the very first AFT predictive assessment. So we're going from retrospective analyses of already soil health successful farmers to future predictive potential analyses of soil health curious farmers. Take it away, Sarah.
Thanks, Michelle. So Michelle mentioned that I'm the Midwest Conservation Technician, and I conducted the predictive assessment for Zach Widener. So today I'm going to describe the predictive assessment findings to give you a better understanding of how that can benefit you and the growers that you work with. So it's important to note that there are some differences between the case studies that have been shared and the predictive assessment results I'm about to share. So case studies are performed on farmers who have already had successes with soil health practices and look at those practices that have already been implemented. This is based entirely on data the farmer has recorded about their practices in operation and quantifies that data into those easy to read 1 to 2 page forms. Predictive assessments are used for farmers who are curious about soil health and either plan to or have recently adopted new soil health practices. The predictive assessment is based on some data from the farmer and somewhat on predictive models using the farmer's data. That provides anticipated soil health and economic improvements to the farmer. So let's look at Zach's story. Here's a summary of Zach, his farming operation, healthy soils practices that he has adopted, and what practices he plans to adopt. His 540-acre corn and soybean farm is located in Macoupin County, Illinois, on flat, poorly drained soils. Prior to our interview in September of 2020, he adopted reduced tillage before corn and nutrient management. Zach considered this predictive assessment part of his research toward implementing new practices and a great way to compare his results over time. Not only is Zach excited about soil health practices, but he's trying to convince his dad that things like cover crops and reduced tillage really do pay off when it comes to your bottom line. The findings of the predictive assessment can help him determine whether 3 new practices listed there, namely no tillage before corn, cover crop seeding before corn and soybeans, and removing fall fertilizer from his rotation will increase his net return in the long run. Zach's resource concerns are soil erosion, water holding capacity and infiltration rates, and nutrient availability. Zach reached out to me after reading the Midwest case studies following a watershed winter meeting I hosted. He said he was interested in seeing how his changes would impact his bottom line. So first, let's look at the short-term analysis. This table shows the potential increases in net income based on Widener's estimates of input costs if he were to adopt the new practices. So this is just the short-term analysis. There are no predicted income increases in the short term since Zach did not make any changes to his crop rotation or harvest his cover crop, and anticipated yield increases are part of the long-term analysis. However, there are predicted decreases in costs. There are machinery cost savings of fuel, repair, and operating expenses, herbicide reduction as a result of weed suppression from the cover crop, more machinery cost savings due to one fewer pass across the field, fertilizer savings from adding liquid fertilizer at planting, loading labor in the fall when there's more time for them to accomplish tasks, and reduced erosion resulting in fewer field repairs needed. The total decreased cost is $2,820 for the study area and $71 an acre. So this table shows the potential decreases in net income in the short term. There's no anticipated decrease in income, but there are increased costs. There are costs involved in learning this new system for cover crop seed establishment and termination, an increase of fertilizer for corn following cover crops to make up for nutrient deficiencies, and the cost of upgrading the farm and equipment to handle liquid fertilizer on the planter with 2x2 system upgrades, storage tanks, and a liquid tender. So the total increased cost is $2,304 for the study area and $58 an acre. The short-term analysis shows that Zach might experience an increase in net returns from his investment soil health practices. So the annual change in total net return is $516 or $13 an acre with a return on investment of 22%. So now let's move on to the long-term analysis. This slide shows the general data used for the long-term analysis. First, the grower chooses a planting horizon. Zach chose both a 5-year, the shortest offered by the tool, and a 20-year planting horizon. He was beginning enrollment in a side-by-side in-field trial and wanted to compare those trial results he saw as closely as he could to the assessment results, while also seeing what the farm might look like by the time the next generation begins participating. A 4% discount rate was chosen based on Zach's experiences. So listed are the practices that Zach would like assessed: adding a legume seasonal cover crop and reduced till to no-till or strip till. Note that the estimated annual change in soil organic matter from Comet Planner based on the 2 soil health practices selected means that soil organic matter could increase by 0.375% at the end of the 5-year planning horizon and by 1.496% after 20 years. Now let's focus on Zach's data for calculating yield improvement. Zach's current average yield is 210 bushels per acre of corn and 72 bushels per acre of soybeans. He hopes to increase his yield by 12% and 18% respectively over the 20-year planning horizon after adopting the 2 new practices. The crop price for corn of $3.85 per bushel and $8.75 per bushel of soybeans is an average from the 4 existing case studies previously completed, which Zach elected to use for his analysis. Note that the PSHEC tool correlates soil type with soil organic matter with respect to central Illinois soils, which are relatively high in soil organic matter. The grower can modify the yield entry to compare findings. This slide displays the soil fertility inputs used for the Widener predictive assessment. Zach elected to input his own fertilizer prices based on his most recent fertilizer purchases. The dominant soil texture is entered, and the nutrient mineralization rates are calculated automatically based on bulk density for the soil texture class. The fertilizer prices assign a value to the pounds of mineralized nutrients. The water storage benefit is the last of the 3 benefit categories. So this slide is a summary of the information Zach provided, beginning with his historic yield loss due to drought of 15% for corn and 60% for soybeans. Zach estimates a future yield loss due to drought of 10% for corn and 25% for soybeans based on a 1% increase in soil organic matter. This means that his drought resistance benefit is $40 an acre per year for corn and $221 an acre per year for soybeans. Zach's water storage benefit after a 1% increase in soil organic matter is $180 per year. So this slide provides the long-term benefit results. The table displays the discounted annual yield increase, soil fertility benefit, and water storage benefit. As you can see, the biggest anticipated increase in income comes from the anticipated increase in yields in both the 5 and 20-year planning horizons. The estimated discounted yield benefit of $15.33 an acre per year, or $613 for the study area in the 5-year horizon, as well as the yield benefit of $48.31 an acre per year, or $1,932 for the study area in the 20-year horizon, are both based on Widener's estimated 15% increase in yield associated with a 1% increase in soil organic matter. The soil fertility improvement over 5 years gives us a small discounted benefit of $1.34 an acre per year, or $54 for the study area, while the 20-year horizon has a more modest discounted benefit of $4.22 an acre per year, or $169 for the study area. His discounted water storage benefits due to improved water holding capacity are estimated at about $4.49 an acre per year, or $180 for the 20-year planning horizon. The total discounted benefit equals $18.10 an acre per year, or a total of $724 per year for the 40-acre study area for the 5-year horizon, and also equals $57.02 an acre per year for a total of $2,281 for the 20-year horizon. This slide shows the combined results for Widener's total predictive assessment. Recall the short-term value of $13 an acre per year and the long-term benefits of $18 an acre per year in the 5-year horizon, as well as $57 an acre per year in the 20-year horizon. The combined results for the 5-year horizon indicates an annual change in net income of $31 an acre per year, or $1,240 for the entire study area from adopting cover crops and no tillage. The return on investment is 53%, and the number of years before breaking even is 0. The combined results for the 20-year horizon indicates an annual change in net income of $70 an acre per year, or $2,797 for the entire study area from adopting the cover crops and no-till. The return on investment is 121%, still with 0 years to a break-even point. So you'll see that the barriers for Zach look a little different than others have shared. I don't recall Zach having any barriers. He had a smooth transition into practices and great resources to ask questions of when they came up. He chose not to apply for financial assistance so that he could make his own decisions regarding termination, timing, and type, as well as planting rates and timing. He and his dad like the flexibility, and they're having good success so far. Zach has a good network of resources to ask questions of, including local ag retailers, me, the local NRCS and SWCD office as well. So information is also widely available from retailers for things like the 2x2 systems, and implementation was luckily not a challenge for Zach. So let's review some highlights of Zach's predictive assessment summary. Last fall, Zach adopted no-till before corn, cover crop seeding before both corn and soybeans, and cut fall fertilizer from his rotation. And for Zach's dad, he has seen Zach implement these practices with success and sees the potential they have for his own soil health and for his bottom line. He's now interested in adding cover crops before soybeans and working to reduce his tillage as well. So to review, Zach's short-term estimate is a 22% return on investment for $13 an acre. His 5-year return on investment is 53% or $31 an acre, and his 20-year return on investment is 121% or $70 an acre. Thanks for reviewing the predictive assessment with me.
That was terrific. Thank you, Sarah. So that was many more slides than just 6. And so if all you can handle or your farmer can handle in predictive assessments, here's that one take-home message slide that you might consider using. All right, we're going to transition now to the Mid-Atlantic. And before we hear from Ben Wierzinski, we're going to have a little hello from the Mid-Atlantic director, Jamie Moreau. Got it right.
Thanks, Michelle. And thanks for letting me just jump in here briefly. I just wanted to acknowledge that Ben and I have reached out to many of you who are joining us for this training as we've sought to identify farmers for both the retrospective case studies and predictive assessments here in the Mid-Atlantic. And I've heard back and have worked closely with many of you to identify these farmers. And I just want to thank you for your help. We very much appreciate it. And I'm going to let Ben fill us in on our case study for Pennsylvania. But before I do that, I just want to briefly mention that we have some additional case studies and retrospective case studies and predictive assessments coming up in the Mid-Atlantic in the next year and 2 and 3. So stay tuned for more information with regard to that. So thanks again, and then I'll let you talk about our Pennsylvania case study.
Thanks, Jamie. All right, Ben Brzezinski, our new ag economist and the FRPP project author for upcoming case studies, retrospective case studies, and future predictive assessments. And he's presenting on his first product for AFT, and it's BNR Farms. Ben.
Yeah, hi everybody. So I'm excited to talk to you guys about BNR Farms today, and then even more excited to talk with Morgan and everybody about her farm. So to start it off with the multiple slide story, BNR Farms is a multi-generational family farm in Schuylkill County, PA. Boots and Robin Hetherington took over the farm from his parents back in the 1980s, and then Morgan brought her now husband onto the farm in 2008. And they've been gradually playing a larger part in the farm with eyes towards taking over the family farm. The total farm is 424 acres, split across 2 farms in which they own and 2 farms in which they rent. But for this analysis, we're going to be focusing on a study area of the 300 acres that they have in a corn and soybean rotation, as well as the 60 acres that they use for permanent hay, which is mostly on the steeper slopes. Outside of that, they also have a pick your own strawberry patch, which is quite famous in the local area, and a spring greenhouse. Their soil health journey started in 2008 when they switched to no-till on all 360 acres of their tillable land. They did this with the financial support of a NRCS no-till contract, which was a 5-year EQIP contract, and PA Resource Enhancement and Protection Program REAP funding to cover the cost of the drill. In 2008, they continued their soil health journey by implementing a rye cover crop after their soybean harvest. So that was on 150 acres of soybean. In the following year, after the success of that cover crop, they continued with the cover crop following soybeans, but also added cover crop following their 150 acres of corn. This is our first farm highlighting soil health practices on agricultural easement land. The family put the home farm under an FRPP easement back in 1999. The other farm that they just recently purchased, that Kevin and Morgan recently purchased, so congratulations to them, was put under an easement in 2012 by the previous owners. Kevin described that he sees both the easement process and soil health practices as ways to ensure successful farming into the future. The soil health practices ensure good quality soil for whatever the future generations of farmers might face on the land, whereas the easements ensure that the land will always be a farm. Their main goal is all about keeping quality, good topsoil on their fields. So just a quick highlight of their results is that thanks to their soil health practices, they've made an estimated change in net income of about $7,000 a year, which equates to $20 per acre within the study area and an ROI of 42%. Michelle, next slide. So to get a little bit more into the numbers, Boots says that he's seen an increase in yields since the addition of no-till and cover crops. Though he acknowledges that other factors have influenced the yields, he attributes a 10% increase in both corn and soybeans to the cover crops and no-till. This equates to about $44 per acre. They've also seen a large savings in machinery and labor costs by switching from conventional tillage to no-tillage. They've reduced the number of planting passes for hay from 5 passes to 1 pass, for soybeans from 4 passes to 1 pass, and from corn from 3 passes to 1 pass. This totals a roughly $32 per acre reduction in costs associated with tillage each year. They've also found a small savings from switching to the no-till drill because it uses similar parts to some of their other machinery, so they don't have to carry as many specialty parts, and they attribute about $500 a year to that savings. This totals out to $66 in, in improvement in net income each year. Michelle, you can flip over now.
Thank you.
So they've also seen some costs. They haven't seen any decreases in income, which is great, but they have seen some increase in costs thanks to soil health practices. The biggest one coming from the adoption of cover crops, which costs them about $54 per acre a year. The cover crop after soybean is higher for them than it is after corn because they use a no-till drill to establish the rye cover crop after soybeans. But this has some benefits. It gives them a quicker establishment of the rye, which means it's in the ground, protecting their soil over winter quicker. This is really important for them because the soybeans leave behind less residue than the corn, and that residue helps protect the soil. So with the corn, they can get away with a cheaper broadcast spreading of seeds. This equates to about a $26 difference between after corn and after soybeans. They do find a savings though, because as I mentioned, they have their strawberry patch. And each year they plant a field of certified rye seeds to use as straw for their strawberries. And starting in 2018, they took the seeds from that harvest and used them as their cover crop seeds. So each year they plant the rye cover crop, or the rye certified rye for straw, and the following year they use those seeds for their cover crop. And this saves them about 50% based off of getting seeds from an ag retailer. They also have a learning cost that's quite small for each year. They spend about 4 years on cover crops, or 4 hours, not 4 years, on cover crops each year, and about 16 hours researching tillage, bringing in a decrease in net income to about $46 per acre. So overall, the bottom line is that B&R Farms has seen their income go up by $66 per year, but has also, or $66 per acre, but has also seen their costs go up by $46 per acre. But overall, the benefits have outweighed the cost, and it leads to about a $7,000 per year benefit for them, which is about $20 per acre. But this has not been without some hiccups and some barriers. First was the upfront cost of the no-till drill, which they've helped finance through the NRCS no-till contract, as well as the PA REAP funding. But with that comes the additional hiccups of more paperwork, and nobody loves paperwork. There's also been the adjusting to a new drill. They found it really easy for soybeans, but trying to set the depth correctly for the hay did not go easily, and so it led to some years of not having great hay production, but they've now gotten that figured out. And then there's also, I guess it might be a social barrier, but a change in that this is not how it used to be done. This isn't how it's always been done. And an example they gave to me was that they always would plant hay in the spring, but under their new no-till system, that just wasn't working out well. And so they've had to switch to fall hay, and this has given them great results, but it's a big change in how they've done stuff for 30 plus years, probably. So then the take-home messages, the one slide kicker is that thanks to the soil health practices, Boots says their soybean and corn yields have gone up by 10%. Adopting no-till has also led to a $32 per acre reduction in cost thanks to fewer tillage passes. And overall, the benefits of adopting no-till and cover crop have outweighed the cost and led to a $20 per acre increase in total net income. So there's my contact information. And now if Morgan would like to jump on, I'd like to introduce Morgan Bond and thank her so much for taking time out of her busy schedule today to come talk to us. And I've got a couple questions I'd like to ask Morgan, but then she'll be available if anybody else has questions. So first, Morgan, could you please tell us what motivated your parents, Boots and Robin, to put the farm under an FRP easement back in 1999?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well enough?
Yep.
Okay, good. My headphones are giving me grief, but I think we should be good now. So when the home farm was was put under an easement back in '99. A large motivation of that was my parents, but also my grandparents, my dad's parents. They were part of the movement in the county and in Pennsylvania, looking towards, okay, what's going to be our conservation, what's going to be our goal, because we were getting to the point where they saw less and less farmers. There was less people getting interested in joining the industry, and what used to be a full agricultural valley and still was pretty prosperous for agriculture was starting to lose participants. And there was a little bit of predation from development coming in, and some of the towns were getting a little bigger in size. So the goal was, all right, what are the ways we can do to preserve this for our future generations? I am personally 8th generation on my family's farm. We started in 1842. So we knew we had some way, some shape, the goal to keep it going as a farm. So when the conservation programs were started and were first in discussion, my grandparents, my parents, they were also involved in, okay, what do we got to do to establish this? What's some of the things we could do to help get these programs going? So when it was time to submit their farm, they were one of the first applications for Schuylkill County, and the goal was we want to participate in this, whether our kids do or don't. We put a lot of family time, we put a lot of effort. We want this farm to continue. And that was the main motivation for, if this program's available, we're going to take it. The money to help improve the farm and the pieces to go with it were a lovely benefit. But the main goal was, we want this to still be here when we're not.
And you were telling me earlier about, so that is the home farm, but the farm that you guys recently purchased, your family had a role in kind of pushing the previous owners into an easement. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so then as you had mentioned earlier, across the farms, there's essentially what used to exist as 4 separate farms, which support at 1.5 different families. That's now kind of in my parents' wheelhouse of farms that we manage. So the home farm was preserved first in '99. Then the farm that Kevin and I just purchased, and I list them as separate farms largely because they're deeded separately. So Kevin and I just purchased the other main farm that has our predominant hay storage. And we helped encourage our landlord at the time to move to agricultural easement. There was, again, concern that it was good land to develop. It's got lovely southern facing hillsides. It has a nice little pond at the bottom. It would have made very, very nice condos. And that's what terrified us, was my parents had been farming they'd been farming that acreage almost as long as they'd been farming the home farm when they took over from my grandparents. And they'd been farming that one since mid-'80s. And so it's been part of the rotation. They've been the stewards. They've been the caretakers of it for about the same amount of time. And we're scared to death to see it get processed into just another kit home. So they encouraged the landlord's time to get it preserved. Now, we didn't see any of the money come back to help the farm, but we weren't the landowners, so it wasn't ours to benefit from, and it was her decision as to what she did with the money afterwards. But the goal was at least somebody could keep farming it, and that was a large part of why we pushed. Even though we didn't see the economic benefit, we at least were able to maintain the acreage, and we knew that the site itself wasn't going to get developed.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to be out on that farm, and you're right, it is beautiful, and I'm very glad that you and Kevin are on it and are going to continue with not just farming, but farming in a really healthy way for the soil. So to kind of jump over now to some of the soil health practices that you guys have implemented, having now implemented no-till and cover crop for a few years, what would you say are the biggest benefits? And tell us about some of the changes that you've seen in the fields.
One of the immediate benefits is less time on the tractor. Kevin and I, my husband Kevin and I, we still work full-time jobs off the farm, and the goal is to eventually transition, but my parents are still farming full-time. They're not ready to retire, but Kevin and I are the chief operators aside from my dad. So the less time we have to spend in the field, the less time we spend compacting the soil is better in our book. And that's,
Kevin and I are farming nights and weekends. That's when we have the prime opportunity. Luckily, he has summers because he teaches high school woodshop. But, you know, farming's not just done in the 3 months of the summer, it's done all year round. So the fact that we have a reduced passes through the field, less time on the tractor, less hours spent on the implements, less hours spent for potential breakdown, that has seen a vast improvement. In terms of advantages over the long term, you can tell which fields have had cover crop in hardier, that have had a better establishment of cover crop. One of the things we see frequently with the strawberries is Canadian thistle. Hate Canadian thistle. And if you have rye established long enough in the rotation, it'll choke it out. Nothing chokes out Canadian thistle, absolutely nothing. We have the one strawberry field was reestablished with rye after it was turned out of the rotation. And you can tell where the thistle patches were, because now that the rye was cut this summer for the straw and for the cover crop seed, there's spot here, spot here, spot here. It's like, I pulled those thistles out. I cared for that part of the field. You almost have flashbacks from the time spent, the thorns in your hands. Where we have seen the rye's been established longer and it's been through the full rotation, you're not seeing nearly as heavy weed predation as you had before. So the rye is doing a really good job of choking out those things that I either don't have the ability to do that with pesticides or with sprays, or just physically don't have the time to walk through and go pull milkweed out and go fish for mare's tail. It's having a much better advantage of choking some of that harder weeds out for us that we can't get.
That's an awesome benefit. And you also mentioned something to me before, that you've noticed that you're planting cleaner rows by planting into your cover crop. Do you want to go into that a bit? So I think that's a really interesting benefit.
Yeah, one of the things that's for me especially, I love my dad, but I'm not a son. So, you know, Kevin kind of folded in a little bit easier with, oh yeah, I know how to do this. Convincing my dad that it was okay to let me plant too took a little bit longer. So a lot of it I learned with my husband while we were dating, on my own equipment, on my own stuff, but so trying to learn, oh yeah, you just follow the path. You just go down, and my dad's planted a lot of these fields for 40 years. So he knows it pitches funny here, it dips there. He knows that acreage inside and outside. Then there's me on a tractor with a corn planter behind going, okay, where's the groundhog hole? Where's the path I'm following? Where's having the rye established? And granted, when we're using the rye as cover crop, it's only about 1 foot, 2 foot tall. It's not full 6 foot full of heads going wherever. It's manageable enough that I can see, okay, I've made that path, I've come back out, and it doesn't damage it to the point where it lays flat after you plant, but you can see a much clearer path of I've been down this road, I know where I'm at, and it marks it where we were kind of having that struggle in between having the no-till established and getting into the rye cover crop as well, because we did no-till for quite a few years before about 10 years before the rye was put into the cover crop rotation. So you're going back through beans. It's not bad because you've got corn stubble to follow you, you've got corn stubble to guide, but trying to plant backwards when you've got the field is shifted with the corn, you're trying to figure out where some of that compaction's gone. It was a lot trickier to plant corn without having those guides, without having those more definite paths behind you, because you no longer have the advantage of, okay, well, I've got a nice clean plowed field that I can easily see where my path is going. That has helped me significantly when it comes to trying to get these fields planted that I'm not necessarily as familiar with as an operator.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because we do see some people that first are switching over to no-till and then they're investing that money back into cover crops eventually. And so it's just another added benefit of, okay, this might have gotten a little bit harder by switching to no-till, but by putting in the cover crops, you're saying that's helped us out, and it's really improved our yield because you're planting better.
yeah, it's helped our consistency, and it wasn't a benefit we expected, but I'm glad we have it.
Can you kind of talk about some of the challenges over the years with your no-till operation and your cover crops? Are there anything that I didn't mention that really stood out to you?
I think one of the challenges that's been more recent is we have good soil health. We've got a firm pack on the ground, or we're trying to maintain that topsoil as best as possible. When we didn't have that, where there was soil erosion, there's water moving. We haven't necessarily lost the water. It doesn't displace the field quite so much anymore. It doesn't displace the soil that we're planting into, but the water still goes places. There's been a lot of evidence in the last couple of years. We had a phenomenal rainstorm in 2017 where there was flooding I'd never seen before, and it kind of justified where a lot of the waterways had always been cut. I had never seen those wet before, and all of a sudden they were rivers. So that summer we had a really eye-opening experience of, oh, the corn didn't move. Well, that's good. The corn didn't move. Everything else did, but the corn and the beans, and they're all still there. So it's definitely been a process of trying to restructure. Now that the water's not slowed with taking the topsoil with it, it now hits some of our waterways a lot harder. So where we have ditches dug, where we have tile drains put in underneath, those are starting to show a lot of the tile drains are 30 years old. So they're starting to show, okay, maybe they're not capable of handling the downpour anymore. So we're currently looking at a lot of the waterways on the home farm. Those are probably going to need restructured in the next couple of years, just because they were never really designed to manage all that water uptake at once. They did their part to catch the topsoil, and then you pushed it back into the field that it came from. But now that they're handling it by themselves, those need to be restructured. Those need to be kind of tailored to better take that water pressure.
Interesting. So I have one more question before I let everybody else kind of have a chance to go. And it was, since we're talking to a lot of people that are going to be going out and talking to farmers about these soil health practices, is there any information that you wish you had about no-till or cover crops before you started that you think would be helpful for these ag professionals when they're going out to talk to farmers?
I think it would be good to emphasize the fact that while this is foreign territory, this is I've not met a farmer who's not afraid of change. And while they're adaptive to new systems and new trials and new plant, I've not yet met one. I know my husband and I will eventually get to the point of where we figured out how to do it and we're stuck in our ways. And our goal is that our children or whoever precedes us is interested in farming before we get stuck, before we're the wheel that can't be greased anymore. I think it would be good to go forward with the narrative of, yeah, this is different. Yeah, this is new. It's also easier than it looks. There's a lot of complicated phrases here. There's new practices to absorb. There's new things to understand. We're also living in an age where it's not just word of mouth anymore. That's the best way to get across to most of our farmers and most members of the ag community. But it's not just a reliant on, I have to know somebody, I have to call them. My husband came home the other night and he went, we have to try this new thing. And I'm like, what new thing? We haven't had dinner yet. What new thing? He's listening to farm podcasts about how they're doing different types of cover crop cycles in the Midwest. And he's listening to, a lot of the videos, like Millennial Farmer. A lot of the stuff he posts is funny, but at the same time, he also has educational segments in there. Well, this is how we're doing this. And it's interspersed with family life and how their farm is established. And it's kind of a 1/3 funny, 1/3 educational, 1/3 reflective. There's a lot more outlets for us as farmers, for us as individuals, where we don't necessarily have to put our whole selves and our whole lives out there and open for people, we can kind of look now. We don't have to necessarily jump ourselves headfirst onto a soapbox and see who comes back. But these practices, or they may be scary, they may seem complicated, they may seem difficult, but at the same time, it's a lot easier to go see how other people are doing it. And I think these case studies help that a lot. You've got the details, you've got the numbers, but these case studies are also showing, okay, somebody tried this. We didn't necessarily know that it was going to be a success or a failure. We didn't necessarily know what the benefits were going to be. We had what we thought the benefits were going to be, what we knew we had in front of us, and what the handful of goals we were trying to achieve were for the first year, for the first 5 years. And we were relieved to see there was additional benefits. There was additional uses for the straw. There was additional uses for the cover crop. There was more ways that we could work it. And I'm pleased with the fact that my husband is excited by, we could try this. And if it's wrong, okay, then we tried it. But we can. We have the availability to try it. And my parents have emphasized, we spent 40 years trying what we could. We know pigs don't work. We know tomatoes do. We know this, no more cabbage. They've had years of trial. And now Kevin and I have the opportunity of what's going to be our trials, what's going to be our integrations. And I'm blessed for the fact that my parents are like, okay, you want to try it, you try it. And if it's wrong, then we go back to what we were doing. But you have to prove to me where it was right, and you have to prove to me where it was wrong. Having that go forward of, it could be scary, it could be difficult, it could be all manner of things. It could fail, it could succeed. But given the case studies we have, given the examples we have, here's the benefits that they outweigh what the risks are. And you don't know that you're going to have added benefits, but you don't know until you try it.
Would you say that because you tried no-till and cover crops, that the next time that you come around to trying something new, you'll look back on those positive experiences and say, yeah, I will give this a go, because I know that if it is successful, great. If not, we'll just go back.
Yeah, you can always fall back on what you had. The youngest tractor we have in the farm is older than me. And so I kind of use it as a reference of, there's always something older that we know works. There's always something established that definitely works. We can try what's new, and as long as what's new meets the benefits, meets the goals we were trying to achieve without having major offsets, without having major backlash, then that's what we're going to go with. That's going to be the new path forward. There's always something conventional, there's always something traditional to fall back on. It's not like you're going to try this new thing and then the farm explodes. Fingers crossed. But right. Yeah, there's always something that we're not leaving uncharted territory and we can't go back to it.
Well, thank you for that. And now I see it in the chat. We have a question from Ryan Shaw, and he asks, have you ever had any issues with slugs or any other predatory damage to your main cash crops?
We haven't had predation with slugs. We get slugs in the strawberries, so I know that they're there. I know that they exist, but they haven't had an opportunity to go after the soybeans or the corn at all. But we treat the strawberries with slug bait so that they don't get very far.
I know you've also mentioned that another side benefit of planting the rye cover crop is that the deer have something to play with. And so, yeah, maybe you could mention that. Yeah. You showed me the field that they completely destroyed.
Yeah. I as much as I love conservation, I'm not a big conservation of deer person. That has been a benefit, though, as much as I don't enjoy it. You can see the first couple of snowfalls. You go back out to the fields that have had the cover crop established in the fall, and there's hoof prints of where they've gone fishing for some of the rye to have something to chew on. And granted, they stay on some of the other fields, one of the set of cover crops that my husband is looking at, he put a tester plot over at the McDemus field. That won't grow corn, won't grow beans, won't grow snot. No, because the deer devour it. There's a herd of about 40 that come out about 5 o'clock every night, and they're on protected ground, so they're well within the right to be there. So he couldn't even get the rye to establish because they ate it so fast. So he planted that section with the radish mix, and that's been touted in our area, at least. That's been touted for good for deer, really good for bait plots, really good for they don't eat all the radishes. It grows faster than they can eat everything. And finally, we have something growing back there that they haven't just mowed off. So some of the newer crops we're looking at, rye is still the predominant overall of the acreage, but there's certain corners where we can't get to stick because the deer are too aggressive. So he tried the radish mix, and there's a couple others he's looking at for at least a barrier around some of the permanent hay fields, because they'll eat holes and then they'll go sleep in those holes in the hay fields. So we're looking at something to at least give them something to eat other than going after the soybeans, something that I realize everyone's got to eat. So why don't we plant something that's in the shadier spots that attracts them better, and it keeps them out of the cash crop and gives them a better chance to get established, to get ahead of them before they realize it's there.
Interesting.
Morgan, it's been such a thrill hearing directly from you, and thank you for taking all those phone calls and visits from Ben. And we're so happy to be able to feature your family's success story. And all the best wishes to you. And we'll keep talking, keep seeing more of you. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you so much.
Much appreciated. I'll see you later, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to get my thoughts out before I lost myself. But, my first question sort of focuses on the results from your case studies. A lot of times you guys were saying that those results were estimated by the farmers based on previous yields. And that's a lot of informed guessing. So I guess my question was, are there experimental designs that are more comparable approach, field A versus field B, where soil health practices have been put in place? And are the results of those experiments sort of providing some credence to the work that you're seeing in these case studies? And I guess my main thought behind that was, with a case study, there's potential for some kind of impact that's unforeseen. The weather was better than normal. It could be, the farmer's guessing what the yield could be, but it could be for factors that are not soil health related, that are not being accounted for, I guess.
Yeah, all the unhappy shortcomings you're pointing out, we experienced ourselves in our interviews with the farmers, in our dialogue with our internal reviewers and our external reviewers. This is a partial budget analysis. It is based on self-reported data. We try to ask for specific quantitative yield data sets. Several of the farmers, if you read through the case studies, provided that, and we were able to crunch the numbers, the average set of yields before the soil health practices were put in place against the average set of yields afterwards. And we confirmed with the farmer that indeed there was a change. And we went through, what else could it be? What are the other things going on during this time period on your field that you would attribute it to? And so you've heard the term, I'm sure, farming is both an art and a science. And so I think we were very earnest, and our farmers were very earnest in their attempt to be mindful of everything else going on, and then to estimate what the potential of that yield increase could be attributed to the soil health practices. And if you read the case studies, they take about 10 minutes to read, by the way. They're super fun and easy. You'll see that we did it many different ways. And one Illinois corn soybean farmer, that farmer was comfortable with us taking the nationwide SARE cover crops yield estimates and saying, I will only attribute my yield benefits to the 2% for soybeans and the 3% for corn. Forgive me if I'm misquoting them. And I will ignore all the potential yield benefits from the no-till and the nutrient management. So that was a super conservative way to take all the yield benefits and only attribute some of them to the cover crops. And other farmers, they came with their own analysis. They plunked down I've been doing the math and, here's my estimate, and we reviewed their math. So there's a whole slew of methods and mechanisms. In terms of other things to point to, I think there aren't on this real farm scale. You can scour the literature on extension-based experimental plots where the real farmers are not in the driver's seat, but it's the extension professionals, and they will have very good detailed records attributing economic benefits and costs to soil health practices, I'm sure. So I think we're always on the prowl for more examples of more quantitative evidence, and we welcome you letting us know. In fact, in the feedback survey we sent out today, we say, if there are other examples of economic outcomes quantified due to soil health, let us know. So that's my very long answer to that very good question.
Michelle, can I jump?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, please, Aaron.
I just want to jump in and say that we also are doing research plots and economic analysis with the NRCS CIG. So we'll be having data over 5 years comparing treatments, a control to soil health treatments. So that'll be a few years from now, but we are working on that. And that's led by Michelle as well.
Exactly. And Aaron's got 4. Several of the case study farmers featured here are in Aaron's project. And so they've made these fantastic commitments for 5 years to have treatment and control fields. So this is a bit of a hybrid, right? It's the farmers in charge of the experimental design for 5 years. And we're monitoring, we're taking soil health measurements. We're putting them through Cornell's soil health lab. We're asking for every time a boot or a piece of equipment goes on the field, you need to let us know, and we're going to estimate those costs and those benefits and come up with, after 5 years, what the soil may or may not be telling us, right? It may be too soon. Soil takes a long time to react to all of these interventions. And what do the economics tell us? And we're also doing a social analysis. So stay tuned for that.
And I guess I can ask my second question, which
Great.
is, the case studies are very interesting. You had the one where you saw the return on investment of 343%, and that seems like potentially a very extreme case. Is there more of a realistic number that, if a farmer was to ask us, what could be my return on investment? What should we be communicating to people? Is it, 150% improvement? Is it 100%? You can at least get your money back. What are you guys seeing that's more realistic?
Right. Well, on those slides, I think that 343% was Aaron's, and so I'll let him take a stab if he wants to. But we did provide the range, and I'm going to say it was low digits. 22% is coming to mind to 343%, right? And so it is a range of results, and we feel very good about that number and the underlying dollars for that farmer, and the farmer feels very comfortable with that as well. So it does seem high, but it is one of 7 row crop case study results.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that. So like Michelle said, every one of our farmers will stand up in front of a crowd. Jay has stood up in front of hundreds of people over the year and a half since we've done his analysis, and had said these numbers feel right to me. And I had a feeling that this is what was happening, but this AFT's project helped me quantify, put an actual number to it. So that one is an extreme case. It's kind of, your results may vary. You can't that's the challenge working with farmers. You can't make promises, and I would recommend not making promises. It's kind of like, you do these things and we expect good things to come from it. And I use this analogy a lot, but it is like, human health. You try to tell somebody, you're not going to tell somebody you're going to be 343% healthier, but you do these things and you should have results. People who do these activities tend to have these results, and that's all you can do is try and see. We're pretty sure you do these practices and something good is going to come out of it. and that there'll be little cost overall for you to do that.
Awesome. Kevin, I see a hand up. Thanks for using that feature, Kevin. If you want to unmute yourself, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. I just had a kind of a thought hearing David's question. I remembered I was in a different webinar a few weeks ago where they were talking about a research project that was looking at kind of farmer perceptions of how their field's soil health was, and then they actually did the testing to kind of correlate the two things together, and they found pretty statistically significant results that, you know, farmers are pretty good at self-identifying their own fields based on kind of their yields and that sort of thing. So I thought that was kind of, it's not, you know, exactly the same as this kind of question, but I thought that was interesting to kind of think about as to address his question of, you know, how correct are farmers in kind of self-identifying what's going on their fields. I think there's some evidence to say that they're pretty good at it.
That's awesome, Kevin. Can you somehow share that with the group? That would be terrific. We'd all benefit from seeing that study.
Sure, yeah, I can try to find it in my emails.
Cool. I also know that our AFT staffer from Illinois, Wisconsin, Kara O'Connor, had a great observation and pulled in a question that she heard somebody ask in Bianca's session. Kara, do you want to unmute yourself and share that?
Sure, I'll just summarize the question from the last session, which was, I've heard that no-till requires additional herbicides. And I want to acknowledge that there's a legitimate tension there, but I also heard Aaron and Flo mention some strategies that the farmers in their case studies used to minimize the need for herbicides, like using oats that winter kill and roller crimping. So I wondered if maybe you could just dive into that discussion a little bit more about herbicides and the role that they play in no-till and cover crops, and strategies to reduce herbicide needs with those strategies.
Excellent. Aaron, Flo, do you want to take a stab at that?
I can talk a little bit, but I'm sure Aaron's probably more versed on this than me. But I think that's partly, you know, when a farmer is making their selection for cover, you know, if they're using cover in combination with no-till, that is, then that's one of their considerations, is selecting something that's going to winter kill so that they maybe don't have to do the roller crimping or don't have to use an herbicide. You know, certain species like rye, I think that's typically the species that's used with a roller crimper because it grows so rapidly in the spring, and it needs to be a fairly good height and to a fairly good growth stage where the lignin is starting to form in the stem, so that when you go over it with a roller crimper, it actually kills the plant and it dries out and mats on the ground. And so those can be successful strategies, but they're not always perfect. And I know my brother is a good example of this because he tried to do it this year and he had mixed success. And unfortunately, he picked a field that was like by this road that everybody drives by, and so they could see his field looking pretty lousy. But a lot of farmers have had very good success with it. And but I will say that it works best when you're actually using cover. If you're only using no-till and you need to control weeds in the spring, I think it's a little bit trickier to avoid using an herbicide. And I'll stop there. Maybe Aaron can offer some additional thoughts.
The only thing that I can really add to that, I'm not an agronomist, is a couple of the farmers have reported, especially John McCauley, but just that, which I didn't talk about today, but that so he does he rolls and also applies a pesticide when needed. So he doesn't always have to use a pesticide, but sometimes he does. But what he likes about using cover crops with his no-till is that he basically says it's a managed weed in effect. So he knows what that cover crop's going to do and provide for him, and that suppresses other weeds. So he's not needing to apply a pesticide, an herbicide, when he would have prior to implementing the cover crops, because the cover crops are out competing his weeds, and then he's getting a benefit from those cover crops. So even though there may be an extra pass for termination, you're not doing a pass for weed control. And so it kind of balances out.
Awesome. We've got 3 minutes left. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing the link in the chat there. Chris asked a great question. The quick answer to Chris's question is about half of our farmers received NRCS cost share to help them on their soil health journey, and the other half did it on their own. And Frank, is there a generic cover crop calculator and one specifically attuned to fine sandy soils on the Eastern Shore? My quick answer is I don't know, but try that keyword search NRCS Missouri cover crop tool that we showed earlier and see if that satisfies your question. And perhaps there are also, that's an economic analysis of cover crops, but there are several decision support tools about what types of cover crops to choose for your area. And they're not coming to the top of my mind. So if any of my colleagues can help me with that, but they're regionally based. And so they're hopefully attuned to the different soils and agro-eco regions and their needs. So we can try to put together some resources. Bianca, of course we'll take a question from you. Go ahead.
I was just going to chime in about cover crop calculators.
Thank you.
The cover crop councils have been building more and more of these tools. The Midwest Cover Crop Council is ahead, so that has been in place for a while. The Northeast released their first cover crop decision support tool earlier this year. And one of the goals is they are working on using the NRCS work, the AFT work, and a lot of other work out there to develop economic calculators that go sort of above and beyond what has been available so far and to make that available nationally. So the Northeast is the next one in line. They're working on the Southeast one currently. There's now a Western Cover Crop Council. So these tools should be able to cover all of this shortly, but they're not there yet. So there's some development still left to happen, but it's in the couple of year timeline at this point. And I don't know if the Northeast one covers Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. So that would be a good thing to check into.
Yeah, I will commit to working with Bianca to make sure we put these resources that she mentioned together in one place and share that with everyone before the end of this event. So I think I should say goodbye on behalf of the team here.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you, Erin and Ben and Flo and Sarah.
Yes,
that was really terrific, and obviously Morgan.